大家好，昨天我们讲了 DoorDash 他给股东的信，今天我们讲这个的下集，就是他二季度的电话会议的内容。我们听一下他的录音。
Your first question comes from Deepak Mathivanan with Wolf Research. Your line is open.
Great. Hey guys, thanks for taking the question. Maybe one for Tony and one for Ravi. Tony, can you give a little more color on what categories drove the acceleration in U.S. non-restaurant verticals in 2Q? Are there any that is sort of at an inflection point of the S-curve where we can expect healthy contribution to growth over the next few quarters? And then maybe one for Ravi. The illustrative Excel calc was very helpful. And can I ask, maybe if you kind of think about Dash in the context of that, where the company currently is? Do you think you're in year 2 or year 4 in the chart? Or maybe asked another way, are you at a place right now where the rate of profitability increase in many different businesses is kind of offsetting the rate of losses, in a few, which could lead to sort of sustained profitability improvement? Or is this sort of a transitory period in which you're looking for signals before you scale investments in many other products? Thanks so much. Any context you can add would be great.
Hey, Deepak, it's Tony. I'll take the first one, on growth outside of restaurants. Hopefully you all saw in our June update when we celebrated 10 years as a company, we actually rolled out, one of our biggest product updates, this year. And that really, one of the featured things that we shipped was actually the launch of both our grocery and retail tabs. And, I think this is another good example of how we do product development in a very disciplined way, which kind of, I think, aligns a bit to the sentiments behind your second question, where everything effectively is stage gated, and we give maximum exposure or investment once we see that they are ready for prime time. And I think when it comes to a lot of these categories outside of restaurants, I think you saw a lot of that growth for us happen in the first couple of years of the pandemic, in which we launched with third-party convenience retailers, whether they be the likes of Walgreens, CVS, 7-Eleven, and many, many others. But then, over the last 2.5 years, we built a multi-billion-dollar grocery business from scratch. And it was, really ready for primetime exposure. And that's one of the things that you saw as we now have more non-restaurant stores on the platform in North America versus any other platform. We're growing faster than every other platform and gaining share dramatically in virtually all categories, and certainly and very specifically also in grocery. You also see this in retail. We've seen a lot of growth in categories that is even outside of food, whether that be in sporting goods with Dick's Sporting Goods, or office supplies with Office Depot and Office Max, or the pet category with PetSmart and Petco, or the health and beauty category with Sephora. So a lot of this is happening, and we found ourselves in a position where not only were we seeing very resilient growth in the core U.S. restaurants category at all-time high frequencies, which gives us just more shots on goal to introduce a lot of these new categories, but we also saw the readiness in terms of product market fit from a selection, quality of service, and affordability perspective when it came to our grocery and our retail offerings. And that's why we made the announcement and why we shipped the features that we did in June.
Hey, Deepak, to your second point, maybe taking a step back, right? Like what you're seeing in the business is a combination of a couple of things. One, the growth in the business continues to be very strong. In fact, in Q2, growth actually accelerated compared to Q1. Given the business is positive on a unit economic basis, that's driving some of the upside in EBITDA that you're seeing in the business. At the same time, our core restaurants business is continuing to improve in terms of overall profitability, as well as both new verticals as well as international are also becoming efficient when you look at the unit economics year on year. That's driving the underlying EBITDA upside that you're seeing in the business. But for us, as you know, it's always important that we are constantly looking to reinvest back in the business. We did that in Q2 as well, which drove some of the upside in growth, as well as the category share gains that Tony talked about. Two, as I look forward, our goal is to constantly reinvest, because our goal is to build the largest local commerce business possible. And referring back to the chart, right? Ideally, the chart goes on forever, because we're always looking to manage efficiently. We're always looking to reinvest back in the business to build the largest local commerce business possible.
这个比较长，它其实是两个问题。他第一个问题呢是问 Tony，Tony 是创始人跟 CEO Tony 徐，他就问说，你之前主要的业务当然是餐厅的送餐，但现在呢你在零售包括跟 Instacart 竞争，现在推出了这种杂货就日用品的这个配送也不错，能不能讲一下就是这个增长的问题？第二个就是说，他问到 CFO 现在是换了人，这个人叫 Ravi， 他说呢，你之前给我们讲是说可能公司长期愿景有一个图，可不可以现在讲一下你这个现在的位置大概在这个图上第几年？就是说是不是已经到了一个时点？你的主营业务盈利比较多，因此呢，哪怕你还有投资，但是呢，未来盈利变得 非常接近啊，就我们昨天讲的，它不可能哪怕想一直亏损，它也无法一直亏损下去。由于它的主营业务一旦量比较大，利润开始显现之后，它就要被迫盈利啊，所以这是第二个问题。那么先来看第一个问题是 Tony 怎么回答他这个增长呢？他说我们其实这个增长我们一直是延续一种非常有纪律的产品开发，就是说你如果是一个产品，你先做一个阶段性的控制，你如果看到了它找到了那个 product market fit 啊，就是这个产品在市场确实很受欢迎，你觉得未来很有潜力，然后你再迅速的扩张，他一直是这么操作的。他说你如果看一下我们最近的做了2个比较重大的，在美国啊，这是比如餐厅之外的。第一个就是很多零售商的合作，他说这个已经我们现在在北美平台上啊，就是指的是他跟那些像 Uber 跟 Instacart 这些竞争的这些所有的北美平台上非餐厅的商店，他们家是最多的啊，而且它增长速度也比别的平台要快，包括在杂货这个领域，就是日用品啊 grocery， 这指的应该是马上要上市的 Instacart， 他觉得相对的竞争它也更有优势。等 Instacart 如果要上市的时候，我们再讲一下它的 S1，但我总体感觉它要跟 DoorDash 相竞争是比较困难的它的另外一部分当然就是 retail， 就是零售呢，我们就是跟食品之外的，然后很大的增长，比如说体育用品的，然后像那些办公用品的、宠物啊，还是 beauty 啊，就是这种化妆品的店，这些现在我们已经签了很多这些店啊，我们帮他们去送货所以呢，从这个角度来讲的话，有很高的增长率。然后而且我们觉得我们6月份把产品做了一个很大的更新，就之前你可能只是订餐，现在你有一个专门的 tab 就是你可以做买这零售的这些东西，还有另外一个 tab 就专门做那个这些那个 grocery 的，就是日用品的这个购买。所以它现在在美国现在已经有3个比较大的数的这种行业来支撑。然后 CFO 就是讲第二点，讲是说公司的投资属于在哪一个阶段，他没有直接回答这个问题。他说我们反正就是说主营业务在迅速增长，同时呢其他的业务也在增快所以我们看到说，因为主营业务的增长导致了它的盈利就有变好嘛，所以这是这样。但是第二个点呢，他就没有具体讲说他们公司现在处于投资的什么情况，他只是说我们希望未来可以永远投资下去因此呢他会一直去找不同的投资机会。
Thank you. Your next question comes from Mark Mahaney with Evercore. Your line is now open.
Okay, let me try 2 questions. One high-level question for you, Tony. Talk about solving big problems for local commerce. So could you just sketch out what you think are some of those big problems that you've not yet, fully or not yet partially addressed, like logistics and marketing? Like when you think about those problems beyond that, what do you think are the biggest problems for local commerce? And then would you provide any color on just talk about Wolt, the acquisition? Here we are a year on in. How do you think that's fared? Has it gone according to plan, better than plan? The year on in, the positive and the negative surprises you've come across. Thank you very much.
Yeah, hey Mark, I'll take both of those questions. On the first one, with respect to large problems to solve. I mean, first, I think this probably goes without saying, but I think it's worth repeating, just given the resilience or continued resilience, I should say, of the strength of the restaurant delivery business. And even though that business has achieved a great deal, it's still single-digit percentage representation of the U.S. restaurant industry in terms of total sales. So I think I don't want to just skip over some of the businesses that we do run today versus just talk exclusively about the invention of new businesses or solving new problems. So I think there's still a lot to solve in our core business, which I believe has many, many years of runway in it. And when we talk about some of these new categories, that's obviously almost starting just many years behind, given the fact that we launched a lot of these new businesses about 2.5 years ago. So I want to start with that as context. But I think when you talk about a lot of local commerce, I mean, let's think about it. I mean, the pandemic in many ways was a very alarming and aggressive wake-up call for every business to be an omni-channel business. And I think it, for a period of time, forced physical retailers to exclusively invest in online because that was the only channel available to them. But I think that as we now kind of, especially as e-commerce goes back into, a bit of the steady state curve of adoption, I think there's a lot of problems there to solve. I think that there's, the world only tends to want to go faster. Customer expectations tend to only go in one direction when it comes to something like delivery, whether that's, with food or other types of items beyond food. that is only going to, happen at a greater and greater rate. And if you're a physical retailer, you need to think about how you're going to participate in that. And so there's lots of logistical problems we have to solve in order to do that. And, we're investing, quite tremendously in building up certainly these partnerships, but also in a lot of infrastructure so that we can, create the tooling with, products like DashMart such that we can work concurrently with all of these retailers so that they can actually compete, I think at the highest scales, with global ambitions. So I think that's, a big part of still making sure that last mile delivery can be true, not just for a handful of retailers, but for every retailer, small, medium, and large. Second and beyond this, there's a lot of tools that now local businesses need to invent. I think a lot of times people think, e-commerce, that's just a website or that's just a mobile app and you're done. Well, actually, everything needs to be rethought of, right? For example, if you used to take care of customer support requests inside your store, whether it's a shopping request or a dining request, well, you can't do that anymore if the orders are happening, through your digital channel. You're going to have to invent customer service in a different way. If you're used to, being once very successful buying real estate at the right locations at the right prices and, effectively using that as a way to market, well, that's no longer good enough. And there's going to be, many ways in which you're going to have to think about not only attracting customers, but building, repeat relationships with all of the customers that you do have. And so I think there's lots of problems to solve, but, whether that's in logistics, whether that's in, customer service, whether that's in, honestly, every part of what you do now needs to, turn from physical to digital. That's what all businesses need to do. So there's a lot of work, and the roadmap ahead is quite lengthy. Your second question was about Volt. In short, Volt is meeting our expectations, which were really high to start with. I mean, in general, we tend to have very high expectations of ourselves. And I think when you look at, the Volt performance, or the thesis, I should say, starting a couple of years ago, before we closed the partnership a year ago, it was really betting on, a world-class team that has achieved the highest retention and order frequency. In other words, built the best product in the world, and whether or not we can, keep growing those geographies, which had long runways for growth, as well as take some of their exceptional management and, run a global portfolio. And so those are kind of the two, theses involved a couple of years ago. And on the first point of whether or not we can keep growing, I mean, I think you kind of see it in the growth rates. We are growing at multiples of what anyone else is growing internationally, and we're also improving our unit economics at the same time. And so I think from a business perspective, that's certainly meeting the bar. The second is more of a management perspective, and what you see there is that, well, actually, Mickey and the team actually runs all of DoorDash's markets outside of the U.S., and so I think we're seeing a very strong start on that front as well, as that team now is taking up a bigger geography, and we now get to split the management bandwidth in the right way so that we can give international, which is a huge investment area for us, the right single threaded focus, and do the same for our U.S. business as well.
这个也比较长，他是问题也是分了两部分啊。他第一部分就是问的，他说因为我们昨天讲他那个给股东的信，我们就提到一个，他说投资的时候，首先他去找一个足够大的 problem 啊，又有一个很大的问题，因为你如果这个问题很小，哪怕你完美的解决了，然后100%把这个市场份额全自己拿到了，但是可能没有多少收入或者没有多少利润，就意思不大，所以一定要有一个很大的问题。所以他第一个问题问的就是说，你能不能讲一下，就是这个大问题，除了你现在已经算是解决的美国的餐厅送餐之外，其他的还有哪些啊是你想做的？这是第一个问题。第二个问题他就问的是 Volt 啊 ，Volt 是 DoorDash 2年前收购的一家北欧的一家跟它类似的一家送餐的一家公司啊，所以呢他就问说，你能不能讲一下你收购之后觉得这家公司怎么样，然后有没有达到或者超过你的预期？所以我们先看 Tony 讲的第一部分，就是说有哪些大的问题。他当然回答我觉得不错，他回答说，第一个我们首先要澄清的说，我们是要找新的大的问题，但是不要忘了我们现在所谓已经解决的问题啊，就是这个餐厅送餐的问题仍然未来有很大的成长的空间啊，就是我们现在的市场份额仍然是个个位数啊，就是未来仍然会有非常非常大的增长。他说如果刨出这个之后他就讲了，就是说其实我们有很多业务现在正在开发比如说我们现在那些新的类别的就是2年半才开始了做杂货的业务，现在已经是非常大的规模了所以我们对他来讲的话，他说你如果作为一个本地的商户你疫情是一个很重要的提醒，就是说你必须在投资 你的在线这一部分，你不可以说只有实体店，然后等客户上门。所以呢，所有的商户啊，不管是大中小，他在未来10几20年啊，甚至更长时间，都必须往这个就是方向去转型。他的从客户角度啊，这个其实非常简单啊，就是如果一般消费者啊，他其实想要的都是一个方向的。其实 Bezos 也是就是亚马逊的 CEO 也是一直讲这个观点。他说我其实重视的是客户不会变的这些需求，就是客户总想，因为人越来越懒嘛，所以客户总想说你能不能送货更快一点啊，就给我更方便一点，让我做的东西越少越好。所以呢Tony 徐也是讲同样，他说客户也是需要送货越来越快，需要各方面做得越来越好。所以 DoorDash 呢，他就在过去几年，一方面是从 logistic 这种配送花很多时间，第二方面呢，就是他还建立了很多工具，帮助这个本地的商户去拿到更好的市场份额。所以他觉得第一个就大的问题就是说，我们要做的不是只服务于少数的零售商，把其中有一个行业把它的送货解决啊。他的野心，DoorDash的野心是把应该是至少是在美国啊，甚至在欧洲多数国家，最好在全世界把这个所谓的最后1英里的问题解决，就是说你在本地的零售商的配送问题全解决啊。这个零售商不管是什么种类，不管是小型、中型、大型，将来所有的你都不用自己做，完全交给DoorDash来解决。然后第二个他说，除了这个送货之外啊，就是说这个其实你公司从线下往线上转移，不是只简单的建个网站啊，建个 app 啊，好像就解决了，不是的。因为还有很多客户服务的问题啊，就是你如果客户之前到你店里，你服务比较容易嘛，因为你是人对人啊，现在呢见不到人，那你怎么保证客户仍然得到非常好的服务啊？所以这些呢 DoorDash 因为他现在有这个平台，他也可以帮解决。所以他从这个角度，他觉得说，一个是物流啊，一个是客户服务啊，我们为所有的都可以服务啊。所以他觉得未来的增长的这个路径还是非常长的。那讲到第二个问题就是关于 Volt， 他说这个达到了我们的预期啊，所以我们预期很高。简单第一方面就是从商业的角度啊，就它增长很快啊，就它收购了之后，借助这个平台啊，收购这个团队在欧洲进行扩张，所以他说，我们在国际上这些市场的扩张的速度是他竞争对手的。我觉得这里面主要指的是 Uber， 是竞争对手扩张的好几倍，而且更重要是说符合我们的单位经济效益，就是说它一边是扩张，但同时呢那个效益还不错。第二个他说是管理啊，他说因为我们发现了这么一个很好的团队，那 Mickey 就是 Volt 原来的创始人，所以他跟原来那个 Volt 那个团队，现在不光是在原来的他的市场去做，他现在已经被赋予美国之外的所有国际市场的管理的责任啊，就是他把Tony 就把就是他全球的业务啊，就是美国跟其他的国家分开，算是一半一半这样来管理。
Thank you, Tony.
Your next question comes from Nikhil Devnani with Bernstein. Your line is now open.
Hey there. Thank you for taking the question. I had one on the investment framework as well in the letter. So you mentioned kind of a 6-year period of investment and $1 billion spent on U.S. restaurants before it started to generate some cash. When you look at the investment areas you have today, do you expect them to take longer to return and cost more because they might be, more operationally complex or there's more incumbents? Or do you expect the return to actually be quicker because you've already built a strong network of consumers and dashers? And then maybe a second question. Tony, you've talked about people eating 20 to 25 times a week as the opportunity. What's the ceiling, you think, on frequency for your business and kind of the primary constraints between bridging the gap to that point? Thank you.
Yeah, all right. Well, Nikhil, maybe I'll take both of those. I think the first is on the, how we think about investments, and the second is really, around where we are on frequency and where it can go. On the first, let me just say, we kind of, offered a quantitative framework, in the shareholder letter on how we've thought about things, but it was meant, as a guide, not as something that is just a formula that always, can be applied, right? I mean, sometimes these things take judgment. And so, the answer to your question about, our timelines or investment dollars going to be, larger or longer or shorter or I guess less, it really depends on the problem at hand, right? I mean, obviously we have a benefit of having the largest local commerce audience that has the greatest frequency, which gives us the most shots on goal. But that doesn't mean that, we just win de facto. I mean, we have to still build the best-in-class product for each problem that we're trying to solve. And then I think the benefit of the scale will actually, really translate in a way that makes, productive sense for all of the audiences and frankly, generate a great return for everybody. And so I don't think there's, necessarily, one way to think about this. We try our best to apply a first principles approach to each problem. We obviously want to take advantage where we can, but the way we tend to think about this is, first and foremost, how do we solve a problem that in a way that is significantly better than how incumbents are doing it today? Make sure that we are very disciplined in both the product investment as well as the dollar investment in which we stage gate, those investments, because precious resources, whether it's the attention we can give in our distribution or the dollars that we have in our budget, or frankly the people that we have working at the company, that's a big consideration. And then the final consideration is whether or not we see an efficient path towards strong long-term economics. And so that's just in general how we think about it. But I wouldn't, over-rotate necessarily on, that being the exact formula that we have to repeat over and again. Your second question, I think, had to do with frequency and its long-term potential. The short answer is we continue to see the numbers grow, right? And I think, on the one hand, there's a few ways to look at this. I think in your question, I think you're kind of saying, well, there's 20 to 25 eating opportunities via shopping opportunities on top of that per week. We're talking about north of 100 occasions a month. That's certainly, I think, theoretically max. And I think that's one way to look at it. We also can look at it from just, what some of our power users or top, decile users are actually doing today. So it's not even a theoretical number. And we think that we can keep growing much, much bigger, I guess, is the short answer. I mean, our top decile users are, using our service a very large number of double-digit times, I guess, is what I would say. And so for us, it's thinking about, well, how do we actually graduate people to that? And the answer is there isn't, a silver bullet here, right? It's the combination of the selection of stores, the affordability of the program, the quality of the service, and making sure that we can deliver the efficient frontier for each individual user, each individual occasion. And if we can do that, these numbers will continue moving up.
And just to what Tony said, right? Like our goal is to, track our teams for both unit economics as well as volume. We're comfortable with the time frame as long as we're making progress across both of those. And if you look at the results of both of our investment areas, we're growing quite nicely, as well as the unit economics continue to improve. We obviously want to run these businesses efficiently. We're happy with the progress we've made so far.
这个问题呢相对没有那么重要，我们讲快一点。他其实也是问了两个。他说第一个说你在那个信里面，就我们昨天讲过那封信啊，他说你讲了说你的美国的送餐业务，你花了6年的时间，花费了10亿美金才达到了正的现金流。那你能不能讲一下你现在的这新的业务啊，是要花更长的时间呢，还是更短的时间啊 ？Tony 就讲得很简单，他说我们不能用那种简单的有一个 formula 啊，好像能算出来一样。他说我们还是按照我们的方式啊，具体的去看啊，需要多长时间就多长时间。那第二个他问到，他说你们一开始的主营业务是送餐嘛，所以一日3餐，所以一个星期有20几次，所以感觉这个不错。他说你这个frequency 啊，就是这个频率，现在怎么能把它提高上去啊？Tony 就讲说，他说我们觉得现在的频率还可以提高啊，因为我们送餐是一部分，现在加上很多零售啊、送货这些东西，所以意味着一个月你可能要有上百次啊，有可能跟我们公司打交道。第二个，他说我们从我们那些活跃用户，尤其那些使用频率最高的用户来判断啊，就是他比一般的用户要多非常多次，所以意味着说你只要产品对头啊，它这个频率还是可以继续上升的。
Great, thank you both.
Your next question comes from Ron Josie with Citi. Your line is now open.
Great, thanks for taking the question, guys. Maybe two. Tony, I think you mentioned this earlier as well, but just the frequencies at all-time highs and what's traditionally a slower quarter, 2Q, just talk about the drivers here in the here and now, I guess. More, is this DashPass users having greater impact, newer cohorts ramping faster, the revamped app as we talked about? I'm sure it's all of the above. If there's anything to call out, though, that would be interesting on frequency. And then, Ravi, on contribution profit, I think the press release talked about U.S. restaurant marketplace generating annualized $2.4 billion in contribution profit this quarter. So can you just talk about, and that's essentially all contribution profit for the company. So talk about the margins across non-food. I think convenience, are we sustainably positive there? Talk about grocery, Walt, any insights there would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, so, on the first question, in terms of, where the growth is coming from, we're seeing it mainly in, two big areas, right? One is users, and the other is the frequency. And you're right in that there is no one individual, driver of this. DashPass did have a record quarter, so it's continues to achieve all-time highs. So you're right as one of the assumptions that, that was one of the drivers. But we're also just seeing, stronger and stronger cohorts. I think that this was a question certainly at the beginning of the pandemic and certainly at the beginning of the reopening or the first reopening in 2021. But I think what you've seen now for 8 to 10 straight quarters, in addition to the output metrics in the, GOV, the revenue, the input metrics we're seeing are, stronger and stronger cohort retention and growth. And that's, a combination of offering the best selection, quality, affordability. The new use cases, to your point, around non-restaurants certainly adds to it. But there's also improvements in the core restaurants business as well. So I think all of these things is adding to it. But the short answer to your question, what's driving the growth, is it's users and frequency.
Just a couple of points there on your second question. The 2.4 billion contribution, that was the U.S. restaurants contribution from Q3 of last year. Obviously, that has grown substantially since that point. What we're seeing in the business is, as we continue to improve the underlying product, whether it's adding more selection, improving the quality of the product, that's driving efficiency of all lines of business. What we saw this past quarter was, like I mentioned earlier, core restaurants improved in terms of unit economics as well as profitability. Both new verticals and international areas improved in terms of unit economics. More specifically, when I look at the new verticals area, last year we mentioned that third-party convenience was positive on a unit economic basis. It has continued to grow from that point. Both grocery as well as DashMart, there's been a step change improvement in the unit economics compared to last year. International business accelerated in the quarter as well as unit economics improved. Again, all of the unit economic improvement we're seeing is being driven by product innovation. We've driven leverage on Dasher costs. We've driven leverage across credits and refunds, as well as sales and marketing.
所以这也是两个问题啊。他讲的第一个问题就是说，你这个使用的频率啊，好像有增长，这些增长主要是来自于哪？所以 Tony 的回答说，这个增长很多啊，就是说 DoorDash 他推出的那个订阅啊 ，Dash Pass 啊，有很好的增长。第二个呢，从产品的角度啊，里面有更好的产品，更多的选择，所以大家使用频率啊，不管是点餐还是送其他的日用品都有增长啊，所以这些都是增长的一个重要部分。然后第二个问题，他就提到说，你能不能讲一下一个信里面讲说，你美国餐厅这部分一个季度有24亿美金的贡献利润，那这好像跟整体的公司的净利润率是一样的，所以能不能讲一下各个部分的构成 ？CFO 呢没有具体讲，他说这个24亿美金的贡献利润是去年第3季度的这个数字不是新的数字，因为它这个数字不是每个季度都公布的，它只是上次讲到这个投资的时候讲了去年那个季度有这个情况，但他讲的总体来讲的话，他说美国的这个数字当然是继续在增长的，就主营业务的贡献利润是肯定继续增长的。除此之外，那些所谓现在不赚钱的业务就是非餐厅送餐的美国业务以及国际业务，虽然没有赚钱但是呢，它的基本的单位经济效益也是在提高的所以这是比较重要的信息。
That's great. Thank you, guys.
Your next question comes from Lloyd Walmsley with UBS. Your line is now open.
Thanks. Two questions if I can. Just first, just following up on Mark's question earlier, can you maybe give us a sense of some of the interesting greenfield investment areas that might be interesting to you all? It seems like maybe there's you're open to things that are perhaps less directly adjacent than some of what we've seen already, like advertising or otherwise. Am I misreading that? Anything you can share there? And then the second one, it seems like we're in a sweet spot, getting healthy growth and good margins. Clearly, core restaurant business firing on all cylinders, and good progress on unit economics of the investment areas. But as you showed in your letter, sometimes unit economics are improving a lot, but as you fuel investment behind that, it can be like a headwind in an absolute basis. Where are we in that cycle with some of these investment areas? Like, should we expect while unit economics are getting a lot better, just a step up in investment behind that may mute the flow through of that? Like anything you can share on the kind of medium term outlook for where we are in that cycle there on existing growth investments? Thanks.
Yeah, maybe I'll take a shot at the first one and maybe say a few things on the second one too, and then I'll and ask Ravi to jump in on the second one as well. I think on the first one, I mean, you're right in the saying that there's no like exact formula of what are the exact adjacent problems to solve when it comes to unlocking local commerce, right? I mean, I think if you think about today, even e-commerce is still a minority of overall retail. And then when you look within, local commerce, so the small, medium, and large physical businesses offline that are trying to come online and kind of compete against, maybe, digital only or kind of traditional e-commerce players, I mean, they're even further behind, right? And so, our mission has always been to grow and to empower these businesses. So we have to, on the one hand, build a marketplace that can drive incremental demand at profitable sales. And on the other hand, we have to give them tools. And so some of these tools are related, but, at the end of the day, it's just, what does it take to solve, the customer's problems? And we think that, local businesses can solve a lot of the problems when it comes to consumption that traditional e-commerce businesses solve. And so we have to just make sure that we can build the tooling to allow them to do that, both through their own channel as well as through ours. I think on the second question, I think one of the important things here is we certainly are there's kind of like two thoughts I have on your question. The first is, we don't get to control when product market fit occurs, right? And so a lot of the even though we would love to have prescribed organizational timelines set around every project with a perfect formula that's exactly replicable across all projects, that's not exactly what the customer cares about. The customer is going to vote with their activity whether or not we've done a good enough job. And so for us, sometimes these things are, you move one step forward, a couple steps sideways, one step backwards, 3 steps forward. And I think that, while what we, demonstrated in our restaurants business as well as these investment areas is that, when you step back and take a look holistically over a multi-year horizon, you get this nice, looking up into the right graph. That's not usually what happens in real life, right? So I think it's pretty hard sometimes when you're just making investments, during the period, especially as you're searching for product market fit, to have any prescribed timelines. But on the flip side, it doesn't mean that you have to bet at all, in that, period of time either, right? I think a lot of what we're trying to explain in our shareholder letter is just our investment philosophy, that we're not just betting at all costs. We're betting when we see signal. And when we see that signal, do we actually scale? This was true, in our product development. We didn't release maximum exposure to our grocery product until very recently, after 2.5 years. We didn't do that for our retail categories either. And we don't do that from a dollars and cents perspective on the P&L either. So I think when it comes to timeline, I think judgment is quite important. And I think the most important thing to take away from the shareholder letter is that we have a disciplined way in thinking about how to make these investments.
Just to add to what Tony talked about, right? Like your second question, for us, we don't focus on the absolute level of investment in terms of the quantum of dollars. Our philosophy has always been, we goal our teams, we goal our lines of business on 2 metrics, which is demand in terms of volume growth as well as unit economics. As long as both of those are progressing in the right direction according to plan, we're happy to continue to invest. Because the most important thing in our business is scale, and we've seen that in our restaurants business, we've seen that in our third-party convenience business. Our goal is, as long as we're seeing success in terms of volume and the unit economics are continuing to improve, we're going to invest behind our investment areas.
这个又是很长，还是2个问题。第一个问题呢，他其实问的是说，你能不能讲一下，就是好像除了配送之外啊，就是很多公司在搞一些周边的业务啊，比如 Instacart 它马上要上市，他讲说我们盈利很大原因是因为我们有广告啊，所以他能不能讲一下你们是不是也有类似的这样业务或者这样打算啊？所以 Tony 其实没有直接的回答，他说我们要解决本地商务的问题啊，就他们有很多具体的需要，所以他们可能需要很多工具帮他们跟那些像亚马逊这种啊，就是完全是 online 的这种商户进行竞争啊。因此呢，他们需要什么，我们会提供什么，所以也就意味着说他当然会做广告，现在已经做，未来会更大，但他没有直接的回答啊。这是第一个。第二个问题，他就问到说，跟之前的问题有点类似，他说你能不能讲一下你投资的时候啊，比如现在这些现有的这几个新的投资大概处于一个什么样的阶段啊，是可以做几年这种打算啊。Tony 在这里面讲的比较灵活，他说我们 你只有事后才能知道你在某个事业上投资是需要几年，什么时候才能收到回报。对我们来讲的话，他说我们主要是比较谨慎，因为很多时候你不知道你什么时候能够找到那个 product market fit 就是你的产品跟市场的需要完全100%的切合这非常合适的这么一个地步，你不知道什么时候能达到这个，有时候你可能进一步要退2步，有时候还要观察一段时间所以他说我们一直做得非常谨慎非常有秩序。比如说我们是做那个零售做日用品的这个做了2年半以后，我们觉得我们找到了真正的对头的 product market fit， 我们才会大规模的扩展做 retail 也是一样所以他说我们在考虑在投资这个时间线的时候判断力是很重要的，就是要灵活。CFO 也基本讲这个，他说我们其实我们投资不看绝对要投多少美元这个行不行，他只要是说我们如果看到销量有增长，同时看到单位经济效益也有增长，只要这2个有，他就会继续投所以他是基本上是一个思路。
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you, guys.
Your next question comes from Douglas MS with JP Morgan. Your line is now open.
Thanks for taking questions. A couple just on the Dasher side. Can you just talk about the drivers of lower than expected acquisition costs in 2Q, and then what makes you think those efficiencies may not continue in the back half? And then with the update recently, any thoughts, early thoughts I know, but on the flexible pay model for Dashers and perhaps any discussion around unit economics for you guys? Thanks.
Yeah, Doug, I'll take both of those. The Dasher acquisition cost itself, in any given quarter, there's some volatility in our Dasher acquisition costs, so I wouldn't read too much into it. Let me give you a few examples. In Q1, we under-forecasted volume, so we had to ramp our Dasher acquisition spend in the quarter. That's what we saw in Q1. In Q2, we saw a couple of things, right? First, the underlying product improvements we made, that helped us in terms of Dasher retention. Number 2, we also benefited from seasonality, where you have college kids come back during the summer. And we see this, every single summer. What we said in our letter is we expect the product improvements to continue to bear fruit in the second half, but we don't expect the same level of benefit or efficiency from seasonality. But again, I won't read too much into the quarter-to-quarter movement because there's some inherent volatility in Dasher acquisition. At your second point, the Dasher product changes we made, that was not a financial move for us. For us, it was mostly about offering choice, offering flexibility to Dashers. If you think about our Dashers, right, like Dashers are at different parts of their journey. Some Dashers are new to the platform where they just want to hit the button, go and start earning. There's others who are more experienced that want to pick and choose the orders that they want to go after. For us, it was truly about giving a choice to Dashers to continue to engage with us on the platform, depending on where they are in their journey, less so about a financial move for us. Hopefully that helps.
那这2个问题呢，都是关于他的送货员就他叫 Dasher， 就是那些专门帮DoorDash去做 delivery 送货的那些人他们都是说是零工经济嘛，打零工的。第一个的问题就讲说，你这个之前讲说你这个获客成本，就是你能够招到送货员的成本有下降，但是呢，可能后面半年可能略有上升那怎么理解这个问题所以 CFO 的回答就是说，这个其实我们招 Dasher， 它这个成本其实有季节性的原因，有别的原因就是很难讲得很具体就是它什么时候会特别高，什么时候会比较低比如说他举例子，他说比如我们在1季度的时候我们可能没有估计到我们市场上有这么大的需要量，所以呢导致呢我们人手不足，所以我们花了比较多的钱去招这些送货员所以1季度。那2季度呢又相反就是一下有很多学生，然后开始赚零工嘛，所以招的比较轻松。所以他说每个季节它都有季节性，所以呢不要太在意这个高一点低一点。所以这是第一个。第二个问题他就也是问到关于 Dasher 他说你现在推出了有一个叫灵活的，就是你可以作为这种送货员的话，你可以有选择是让DoorDash怎么给你付费。所以 CFO 的回答说，这个对我们来讲不是一个财务的考量或者说主要不是一个财务的考量，而是想给这些送货员给他选择，就是因为有些人可能是年轻嘛，刚刚做这个，所以只要能赚钱什么都可以。另外有些人他可能是有别的工作，他别有经验，对这些呢不太在意具体的钱数他们更注意说我最好能自己选我哪些单子我要接不要接所以他就这样呢，他通过这种付款的方式就把这个做区别，所以把这个选择权交给这些送货员。
Helpful. Thank you.
Your next question comes from Brian Nowak from Morgan Stanley. Your line is now open.
Great, thanks, guys. Maybe two. The first one, Tony, just to sort of talk about your 10-year-old, sort of the oldest, the core U.S. restaurant business. As you sort of think about, customers voting with their activity, talk to us about sort of how you break down the forward growth and what you have to invest in to kind of continue to grow that core U.S. restaurant business from here across users, frequency, spend per transaction. How do you continue to get more customers to vote more in that core oldest business? And then the second one on the grocery non-restaurant piece in the U.S., recognize the new app design is having an impact. When do you think about sort of increasing your marketing to bring new users into the funnel for groceries first? Has that started yet, or is that something to think about in the back half or in 24? Thanks.
Yeah, maybe I can take a shot at both those. I think of the first question of growing the U.S. restaurants business. Well, I wish it was just one lever that we'd have to pull, but I mean, we continuously have to work on selection, the quality of the service, the affordability of the programs, and our customer support. Right? I mean, this is one of these businesses where I think it's really easy to make surface level comments about the business, but really the execution happens at the order level, and you have to be better on each one. And for us, I think the criteria to be better really goes back to the hallmarks of how we have achieved the scale that we have in the restaurants business in the first place, which is offering the best combination of selection, quality, affordability, and service. And so, there's certainly a lot of things that we have in the books planned for each one of these areas, but that's really, how we always think about building a better product. And we can measure whether or not we're making progress based on our retention and order frequency. And, we continue to have the highest retention and order frequency rates amongst any other platform. The second question, I mean, in some ways, some of this is already happening where we have, to your point, customers maybe finding out about DoorDash for the first time, through a non-restaurant category, whether that's groceries or pets or flowers or, some of the retail categories that we just discussed earlier. Already, outside of the restaurant category, we attract more of new customers that are ordering from these non-restaurants for the first time in the industry than any other platform. And I think that's, pretty remarkable given that a lot of these categories for us only started about 2.5 years ago. Which, suggests that some of this activity is actually already happening organically. Of course, we're investing in some marketing behind this, for sure, and especially as, I think we are making the evolution of from being a restaurant delivery product to something that delivers your entire city. We're not there yet. Obviously, we have a long ways to go on the selection, the quality, and the affordability, but I think it's encouraging to see that, we already attract more new customers into this field than anyone else, and that a lot of customers are coming to us for the first time, not for restaurants.
Right, just like what Tony talked about, right? What we saw in the quarter was growth in both users as well as order frequency. Order frequency hit an all-time high. It's growing year on year. User growth has also been very strong. The way at least we think about it is, if you think about our platform, we have roughly over 30 million active shoppers on the platform any given month. But if you look at that number over the course of the last year, that number is multiples higher. It's just a fraction of the overall users using the platform, right? That tells you the scope of the opportunity on the user growth side. Order frequency, again, very similar. The blended order frequency across the platform is mid-single digits, off of the base of more than 100 usable moments. So when I look at both of those, the scope of the opportunity in front of us is large. The good news is, again, what moves both is largely the same. It's improving selection, improving quality, making the product more affordable. So when I look ahead, as we are continuing to innovate on the product, I'm confident that we'll drive growth both across users as well as order frequency.
这个我们就简单讲一下，它这个其实也是分了2个部分。这个问题，第一部分它就能不能讲一下你那个比较老的那些扣号那些组它是增长什么情况，你是怎么留存这些客户的。Tony 他就讲说，这个其实没有一个简单的你可能从表面上一下就能看出来的东西。他说这个具体都要下细功夫，在每一个订单的这个层面你要帮他解决从你提供最多的最好的选择质量、负担能力这些以及服务的水平这些最终决定了他从现在这个情况来看，它的就是订单的频率的保留率仍然是在所有平台当中最高的，包括那些比较老的那些就是10年前第一次加入DoorDash 这些组它现在仍然是这个情况，就相比竞争对手它的留存率是最高的。第二个问题他就问说，你现在有送餐也有其他一些零售或者是杂货这些新的领域有没有这种跨领域的，然后把这个流量然后从原来的然后吸引到一些新的领域来。Tony 就讲说，这个其实已经自然在发生了，就是他们没有大规模的花市场费用，就是说把那些之前只是 在 DoorDash 订餐的一些用户，然后吸引到让他用 DoorDash 去做，比如说去做杂货啊、日用品的购买。但是呢，实际上已经发生了，就他看到在餐厅类别之外啊，他们比其他的任何平台吸引了更多的那种首次的非餐厅定位的新客户啊，就是说已经很多人自然的就是从 DoorDash 的一个业务啊，自然过渡到他新的业务里面，在没有任何市场活动的推送的情况下啊，所以我觉得这是一个不错的指标。
Thank you both.
Your next question comes from Eric Sheridan with Goldman Sachs. Your line is now open.
Thanks so much for taking the question. In reading the letter and some of the answers so far in the call, I just want to come back to this concept of signal. If you think about the mix between being a marketplace and being more of a first-party player yourself in local commerce, and what signal you might be looking for when you think about a business like DashMart and thinking about growing geographic footprint or SKU diversification inside that business as a potential area for investment over the medium to long term to be a larger, more scaled 1P player against the local commerce opportunity. Thanks.
Yeah, so Eric, I'll take that. I think it's important to start with the context of why we even are investing in some of our 1P efforts in the first place, which really comes back to this capability point of making sure that we can enable every small, medium, and large physical business to compete effectively and efficiently in the digital world. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to build ultimately is a product that can deliver you everything from your city, exactly what you ordered, and at around the same price that you would have paid yourself to do that service. But today, that's not where status quo is, right? In terms of, I think, any product that delivers anything outside of restaurants for sure. And so that's kind of why we invested in DashMarts in the first place. And so it's always in concert in partnership, with our merchant partners of how to make sure that something like DashMart can be a useful service for them. It's not necessarily signal of is our 1P now going to take a bigger portion. It's actually instead learning how to do it really well, such that when we work with these third parties and think about inventing some products for the future, that this could be one capability set in our back pocket.
这个我相信 Tony 没有讲实话啊，就是他这个问题问的是他那个 DashMart 就是因为他首先是帮别人送货啊，当别人送货了，你送的比较多了之后，就发现说，他可能客户很多去 order 的，他就订的东西啊，就这么几十样，就是比较重要，比如说酒可能就几个品牌的什么样的酒什么之类这些东西啊，所以呢他就有这些信息之后，他可以做自己的这个生意啊，就是他可以像 DoorDash 他就做了一个叫 DashMart， 就是你可以直接在他的商店里面直接买，你不用去跑别人的店里啊，所以这个其实业务呢它是比较敏感的，因为这个直接的跟他的自己服务的客户相竞争啊，就是比如你从我这里买了，你就不用去买别人的货了，对吧？所以他这个问题问的是说你如果讲到信号你怎么考虑 DashMart 这样的问题啊？它有什么样的信号让你觉得它现在可以变成一个非常大的生意啊？你可以去加注啊？所以 Tony 讲的就是非常外交辞令啊，他说这个我们其实这个不是看什么信号的，我们主要是打造一个产品呢，跟我们的商务合作伙伴合作啊，保证呢我们这个东西对大家都有用啊。但我觉得其实这个这是唯心的说法啊，就是 DashMart 它这个产品本身对 DoorDash 是非常重要的，是因为它可以控制整个的物流，可控制所有的利润啊，所以对他来讲的话，这应该是未来发展的很重要的一个啊，所以这个回答应该是就是算比较低调啊，就是可能解决一些商业伙伴对他们的担心。
Thanks, Tony.
Your next question comes from Ross Sandler with Barclays. Your line is now open.
Thanks, guys. First, a little shout out to Andy or Ravi or whoever's idea it was to put the SBC table at the bottom of the letter. Appreciate that. But my question, Tony, is about DashPass. So you guys were, I think, the first in the industry to roll out subscription, and it obviously drives a huge amount of value. But now we're at the point in the industry where it's maturing, and there's a lot of other subscription services from folks that compete with you guys in grocery, folks that compete with you guys in restaurant, e-commerce companies that compete with you guys. So as you look out, into the future of DashPass, do you feel like selection and your advantage in selection is enough to continue to differentiate, or do you think you'll need to add different things to the bundle, whether that be like physical retail or digital services, et cetera, to continue to differentiate DashPass? Any thoughts on that? Thanks a lot.
Yeah. So customer expectations always go in one direction, right? I think I've said this, plenty of times, and I think that goes for subscription programs too. But the other thing that goes for subscription programs is the most important thing is usage, right? You want to, subscription programs that are really successful are those that get used, the most often, which is what, drives the value, right? And sometimes that's measured in dollars and cents. Sometimes that's measured in, time spent on a service or time saved from a service and et cetera, right? And so, for us, I don't think it's necessarily one advantage, right? I wish if it were just one advantage, then it'd actually be quite easy to invest from a product perspective. But it's always been, thinking about the selection, the quality, the affordability of the program such that we can drive the North Star of usage. And so we're going to always have to invest to make sure that our products are getting used, the most. I think the benefit for us is that, the category that we started in, eating, which we've talked about on this call for a bit, is the largest and most frequent, which means that it does have the largest usage from both, I think how people think about spending their discretionary income to just what they do physically to survive. And so I think, that was a very natural, candidly reason why we started in the restaurant delivery category. But as we, expand and try to be more useful to the cities that we operate in and all of the different types of categories of retail that we participate with, we're going to have to keep thinking about investing more into things that will continue to drive the usage of our subscription programs, which is ultimately what will drive the value of DashPass.
And Raj, just to add to what Tony said, right? Like what we're seeing in the business is as we continue to improve the selection and the quality of the business, that's driving MAUs. These MAUs are retaining at a higher rate. They're ordering more. As they order more, they habituate on the platform and graduate to DashPass. In fact, if you look at Q2, DashPass had a record quarter where subscribers grew not just quarterly but on an annual basis. It was one of the best quarters ever for DashPass for us.
他这个问题问的是关于Dash Pass 就是他那个订阅服务，因为他们是第一家推出的，所以问题就是说你们怎么保持这个的竞争优势主要是做什么？然后所以他回答的也比较统略，因为这个没有一个具体的细节的回答。Tony 就讲说，他说这个你要想让订阅让客户非常喜欢，然后一直用下去最重要是说你要让他用的多所以用的多就是像刚才讲的是在细节上下功夫，然后把产品做得最好，所以这个其实主要就讲这个意思。
Thank you.
Your next question comes from Michael McGovern with Bank of America. Your line is now open.
Hey guys, thanks for taking my question. Just maybe a couple for Ravi on guidance. Looks like even at the upper end of guidance for Q3, we're expecting a little bit of a quarter-on-quarter drop in GOV. So I'm just curious, is that just seasonality or anything else to point out there for the quarter-on-quarter drop? And then second question, if I take the upper end of guidance between Q3 and the full year, looks like Q4's EBITDA profit and margin will be higher in Q4 than at any other point in the year. So just in that upside scenario, hitting the upper end of guidance, what are some of the factors that contribute to that?
Yeah, Mike, I'll take both of those, right? Like on the guidance point itself, what we're seeing in the business is, obviously consumer spending continues to be strong. The underlying cohorts continue to be very stable. That's what's giving us confidence to, first of all, bump up the GOV guide for the rest of the year. What you're noticing in Q3 is, normal seasonality that we largely see every year. There's, nothing more to that outside of seasonality. In terms of, EBITDA guidance, again, like I said earlier, right, the combination of continued improvement in growth for us, the overall business is positive on a unit economic basis. Q4 growth is higher than Q3. You're going to see some upside in EBITDA flow through. Number two, the product improvements that you're making is continuing to drive efficiency. Very important to remember, right? Like we're constantly looking to reinvest back in the business. And if you have good opportunities to invest, we're going to continue to drive efficient growth as long as we can stay within our discipline parameters.
所以这个他是问的关于那个 guidance 就是指引，他说你的下个季度好像是从整个流水上指引好像稍微低了点，这是第一个。第二个从 EBITDA 就是调整过的利润他说这个好像感觉好了一些，能不能具体讲一下？ CFO 其实讲的比较简单，他说的这个其实流水的问题就是一个季节性第三季度比较高，第四季度稍微低一点，这个没有什么别的。第二个就是从利润角度就是像一直讲的，它的整体的利润水平在不断的提高所以就是主流到第四季度的增长也会更高一些。但是呢，他打了个补丁，他说当我们如果未来发现有更好的投资机会，我们可以继续投资所以这个未来不见得是一条直线很有可能是会不断变化的。
Got it. Thank you.
Your next question comes from Youssef Squali with Truist. Your line is now open.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So maybe, Tony, going back to the investment letter and the framework that you're putting out there, outside of customers and dashers and the network that creates, which are arguably super powerful, can you maybe talk about core competencies that you believe that you're kind of leveraging just better than anybody else out there that kind of gives you this potential unfair competitive advantage that's allowing you to grow so much faster? And then, Ravi, I think you mentioned that your aggregate GOV accelerated year on year. Is that statement true for U.S. GOV as well? Thank you.
Yeah. So, on the first question, I think there's basically like a timeline or a sequencing, if you will, almost of how to arrive at the answer to your question, which is, first, when it comes to building a product from the very beginning, what allows that product to grow faster, relative to someone else's, is whether or not we solve a customer's problems better, right? And I think what's hard to see in this business is that it's really a combination of things that a customer is asking us to solve. They're asking us to make sure we can get the right stores and the right items from those stores at the right price point, at the right service level, and obviously if things go south, that we fix it. And there is no shortcut in many ways, in kind of betting on any one of these factors. You kind of have to be better at the combination. And I think that if you can achieve that, then you kind of have this timeline where after a certain point of scale, it translates into a few structural benefits. One of those benefits is, recall. Customers kind of come to us first as the eating app. We're working on that to make that true in every country, but in the United States, that's certainly the starting place. And again, when eating is the starting place where you have the most shots on goal, and Robbie talked about, the multiples of the 30 million, monthly active shoppers who shop with us, once a year. I mean, there's an even bigger number than that comes and just opens the app who doesn't shop at all. and so in many ways, we don't have to acquire any more new customers from external channels. We can just go within our own ecosystem because we started with the largest one, which when it comes to consumption, which is eating. Other benefits come from the scale logistics components that you talked about, right? Knowing how to operate that really efficiently is something that continues to compound in terms of giving a natural funding source for other types of investments that we want to make. So I think the way I think about this is always the execution starts first, making sure that we can solve a problem better than someone else can, so that we can create the best product. That's what generates the growth. And then, structurally over time, what are the things that actually, can we actually use the product advantage that we built to generate a structural advantage? And I think you're seeing that in both instances, which is why you've seen the resilience and the growth in the core restaurants business. It's why you've seen faster growth and share gains in these non-restaurant businesses, as well as improving, or very, very quickly improving, unit economics. And that's why we're continuing to invest.
Yusuf, on your second question, orders accelerated from Q1 to Q2, not GOV. And if I break it down by the different lines of business, core U.S. restaurants, even at our scale, the order growth was stable. Both new verticals, international, as Tony just mentioned, they both accelerated from Q1 to Q2.
OK， 这就是最后一个问题。我觉得最后一个问题其实也是最核心啊，他就是问到说，这市场有这么多做类似的业务的，为什么你们家做最好，然后别人都不行啊，就是至少都比较差，相对来讲。所以 Tony 就讲，他说你如果是回想我们从一开始做这个产品按照时间线来排序的话，就是一开始做的时候大家都差不多啊，从起点的时候差不多，所以关键在于一个运营上的解决以及执行能力啊，就是说因为客户要你的不是一个简单的东西啊，不是说只是便宜或者只是送货快或者只是哪个商店啊，所以他要的是一个完美的一个组合。所以我们每个订单上如果都能让客户相比别的竞争对手更满意，所以那我们就会拿到这个客户，然后这样滚下去之后，等我们的产品等我们的业务上了一定的规模之后，它就会转成一个叫结构性的效益啊，就 structural benefit。 所以这里面指的是什么？比如说第一个，我们一开始做的时候是做的是送餐嘛，送餐是美国就是最多用户也是用的最频率最多的，一天要3次。其他的你要去商店去买东西或者买日用品，肯定没有一天3次频率这么多嘛。所以他说，因为我们先做这个啊，现在做完之后大家使用最好，所以等他想起来再去做别的类似的业务的时候，他首先会想到说DoorDash 我的反响最好，所以他可能回到我们 DoorDash 的平台。所以这就为什么说他觉得从市场的角度，他不需要花太多的钱去开发新的市场去做那个获客，因为他已经通过送餐的服务跟美国的很多消费者打过交道，而且有不错的印象 啊，所以这是第一个。第二个结构性的就是效果，就是当然是就是你有了规模之后做物流嘛，你这规模越大做物流越容易啊，所以这个也是非常明显的。所以说这就为什么说他说一开始呢肯定是从这个核心的业务你的运营开始把这个做得非常好，然后呢这个做了之后，然后看到了很快的增长，市场份额的增长，单位经济效益的增长，再有了这些结构性的优势，所以现在这个阶段别人再想去跟他竞争就相对比较困难了，因为你要他之前的优势的所有的这过去10年的你都要重复一遍，要保证比他还要做得更好这就相对非常困难。所以这就是 DoorDash 2季度的财报电话会议所以希望大家喜欢。视频不是投资建议，谢谢，再见。